Bonjour and welcome to the Road to Recovery. Karlo with ESPN Los Angeles. Proud to always be joined by the one and only Dr. Alan Beyer of the Hoag Orthopedic Institute. Doc, ça va? Yeah, I'm in this French tongue now after
Well, good.
watching
You can keep you
everything
can
going
keep
on in
going here because
France.
unless you're ready to switch to Yiddish or something like that, I don't think I'm going to be keeping up with you.
Doc, it's always great to have you. Even better on a high note, where we are proud to have just witnessed Simone Biles and the women's gymnastics team win gold in the team competition. We're proud of them for bringing gold home. Their redemption tour is complete. But, Doc, what really stood out to you?
A couple of things. First of all, congratulations to the U.S. women's third gold in four tries. So that's a great record. Um, Simone Biles was under more pressure than almost any other athlete in these games because of what happened in 21 in Tokyo with her suffering from the twisties, as she calls them, as gymnasts call them. It's an affliction that's very common amongst gymnasts, divers, others who have to change direction in the air and kind of lose their equilibrium and lose the horizon. She kind of felt in the lead up to the competition, the team competition last time in Tokyo, that she just wasn't there. She just didn't feel it. She didn't feel capable of sticking her landings appropriately. She was disoriented. And to her credit, she showed the courage of saying, I can't do this. I'm having an issue right now, and I have to do what's best for me, Simone Biles, not necessarily what's best for my team right now. And she dropped out. She came back afterwards in some of the individuals, but she was not there for the team event. Okay, so fast forward 3 years later, she has dominated her sport in the last 3 years. She's got moves named after her now. You can always tell a great competitor in Olympic type games when certain moves are named after them, and she's achieved that now. And she was a heavy favorite going into the games. But number one, the memory of 3 years ago has to still be there in your head. I mean, any athletic competition at this level is a head game. We know that. And number two, she had a minor calf injury a couple of weeks ago during warmups. And those who criticized her 3 years ago were probably quick to jump on the anti-Simone bandwagon and say, oh, she's just looking for an excuse now that she doesn't perform her best, doesn't nail it. She's got this calf injury. She could say this was bothering me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, those bandwagoners can just jump off the bandwagon because they were wrong. She performed through it. She was near flawless. She had the highest scores on each individual apparatus, even higher than the quote specialists on each of those particular pieces of equipment. So she just carried the team on her back, set the example, and overcame the minor calf injury, and more importantly, overcame the mental bugaboos that she had 3 years ago and was able to prove that she was who we all thought she was. And, nobody could be happier. I love when an athlete overcomes an obstacle and sticks the landing and sticks it to the critics. I thought, to me, that's a double win. Well done, and shout out to her because she's dominating the sport and she's just fabulous to watch.
That's perfectly said. I love it when the critics have to eat crow. And yes, she absolutely delivered when Team USA needed her the most. But let's go back to the Twisties. Like, Doc, we've never heard of the Twisties before. Is it more so because, hey, the sport of gymnastics really gets really talked about in the mainstream every 4 or so years?
Every
Is,
4 years,
is
except
that
when there's COVID, then it's three years.
ex-
Right?
exactly like
You're
it's
right.
a certain time frame?
The twisties are a term that many of us, myself included, were not familiar with until she talked about it at the games 3 years ago. But things like this, the yips in golf. Those of you who watch Ted Lasso know that they kind of stole that term, the yips, when their great player couldn't make a penalty kick. He had the yips. They brought in a sports psychologist. Every sport has its own, unique feature that is a kind of a between the ears feature, not a physical feature that prevents an athlete, a participant from doing their best. So in gymnastics, it was the twisties. It's kind of like, it's very descriptive. It really kind of tells you exactly what it's doing. But like I said, it happens in diving. as well. Even some hurdlers sometimes say that they have that kind of thing. The horses don't get it in the equestrian events, as far as I know. Um, but I think that it's real. Mental, where an athlete is in their headspace is a huge part of their performance. We tend to underemphasize the mental aspects of sports. I talk about it a lot on my radio show, mindfulness and being in the zone and whatever term you want to call it. But when that goes upside down, when that flips out, you get the twisties or you get the yips or you get whatever else you want to call it. And that happened 3 years ago to her in Tokyo.
Fans didn't hear of or didn't know of the Twisties up until 2021. I was doing some research. I had seen previous Olympian Laurie Hernandez, also with Team USA Women's Gymnastics. She described having the Twisties in 2016. Another Olympian gymnast, she mentioned she's had the yips or the Twisties since 2011, when she was 10 years old. And it was interesting. I found it so fascinating. Simone Biles, they were playing this interview during the telecast of how she described what the twisties were and how she can make us understand it, us normal folks. And it was like waking up suddenly one day and getting into the car and all of a sudden not knowing how to drive your car. Like the car was just moving and there's a disconnect between the mind and the body, which is scary because obviously you can get into an accident and just have no control. These are athletes who are midair. And it's smart to see that Simone Biles can make a call and for her own sake and her own safety, decide not to compete in 2021. And gladly to see her redeem herself in 2024. But Doc, I also want to mention and go back to something that you were talking about, the mental block and overcoming that. That's something that we've seen not just in gymnastics, not in just other sports where the twisties are involved, but just overcoming injuries in general. Athletes have to overcome that mental hurdle of can I trust my body again? And that's something that Simone had to do when she was getting back into training. Doc, what are some of the things, what are some of the challenges that you've seen athletes have to go through when it came to, hey, can I trust my body again?
Well, sometimes it's an outside influence. It's not even just your body. When a pitcher takes throws a fastball and it hits the batter in the eye, Tony Conigliaro is the famous one that always comes to mind. But any other hitter who gets hit in the head or hit in the face, we saw a player just the other day take a heck of a nice shot to the face. Getting back there and doing the exact same activity that caused you that incident is a real difficult one to overcome sometimes. But these people do it. I mean, it's well, some don't, and they wash out. I mean, let's face it. Not everybody is able to control their mind that way. But this isn't unique to athletics. I mean, think about writers and writer's block. We've all heard about that, where somebody is a prolific novelist or poet, and suddenly they're sitting at their desk with a pen and paper, and nothing's coming into their head to write down. Um, I'm not going to say surgeons get it. Fortunately, we are usually able to talk ourselves through that. But think about just about any dangerous occupation. A firefighter who was climbing a ladder to rescue somebody and gets injured, or the person falls. That guy has to overcome that event to go back on the ladder again, because that's incumbent upon what his or her occupation is. So it's not unique to athletes. It's just watched by millions when it's the case of athletes, whereas sort of the everyday person who has an everyday job, a million people aren't watching you and judging you. And judgment is always so significant in our lives. That's the hard part, is how you overcome all those people with their negative judgments about you, and they really don't know. They're not in the situation. So my hats are off to athletes, and sports psychology has become, let's face it, in the last 20 years, a huge field for good reason. And I think that these people deserve a real shout out. I still can't understand how I was watching fencing yesterday, and here are these athletes doing 4 years of practice or something, and it lasts like 7 seconds. It's like, or you lose in the first round of a round of 16.
Or even
It's
worse, get
like, oh,
disqualified.
or you get DQ'd. Exactly right. I mean, well, I saw an interesting thing come out today. The Chinese men wound up with a silver, and they blamed their coaches. I mean, I feel sorry for them when they get back to China. I don't know how they're going to be treated when they get back to China, throwing their coaches under the bus. But actually, they were very old. They were a very old team. As Chinese men were in their late 20s average, and that's old for gymnasts, even men gymnasts. But I think that it's just part of the sport. It's just part of what they choose to do and do so well. I think their exposure is much more than 20, 30 years ago. I mean, we didn't watch the Olympics with the same fervor. It wasn't covered with the same fervor as it is today. It's on TV 24/7 now from France. It never used to be. It used to have 2 or 3 hours of edited coverage and ads. And so it's much more, and which is good. Every sport should be shown. I watched that rugby sevens. That was fantastic. I didn't know anything about rugby sevens, and it was really great to watch. So these athletes are great. They deserve it. The opening ceremonies kind of was a little shameful because it kind of, yeah, I don't know. It kind of didn't demean the athletes, but took the athletes out of the spotlight. Okay. The athletes need to be in the spotlight in the Olympics, not everybody else, all the famous people who are coming there to be on the red carpet and everything else. This is all about the athletes, and we can all learn a lot from watching how they behave and how they perform.
It was unique to say the least. Doc, you mentioned understanding. I think that's one of the biggest things about this chat that we're having about Twisties. But hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but what if we relate this on a more basic scale? Things like for somebody who's a new dad, daddy brain, mommy brain, brain fog, brain freeze, these little things. Aren't these mental blocks?
Of course they are. And we all have them every day. They've just become such part of your daily life. You don't even notice the whole time. How many times, well, maybe not you, you're a lot younger than me, but you walk into a room and you forgot what you went into the room to go get or go do. I mean, these are just things that are part of natural life. And I think that but we're not held to the standards that these athletes are held to on TV during the Olympics. They get their one shot. And if they take a misstep on the balance beam, it's over.
On a closing note, Doc, I find it so fascinating now that sports psychology has entered the mainstream. One, what took so long? You mentioned just in the last 2 decades. And two, where do you see the evolution of sports psychology and where do you want to see it from now?
So I think it took so long. That's easy to answer. Mental illness has never been in our society, has never been accepted with the same ease as some kind of physical impairment, diabetes, heart disease, some real organic issue. Because you can't see mental illness. There's no manifestation of it that you can examine. It's by the person's actions and spoken words and things like that that it comes out. Mental illness is finally starting to get the recognition it deserves. It deserves more. So many of our ills in society today are because of undiagnosed or untreated mental illness. And so I think we're catching up, but we still have a long way to go. As far as sports psychologists, it shouldn't just be labeled sports psychology. This is just garden variety, normal psychology. I mean, you don't have to be Bob Rotella to teach golfers how to get over the yips, or I can't. That's probably the only sports psychologist I can name off the top of my head. Um, this is just something that a good psychologist or psychiatrist can help people with. I've become a much bigger believer in self-help and self-awareness. I read a lot of golf books. Golf is my game, right? And I've really learned, I used to poo-poo when they say, oh, visualize the shot. Visualize the shot you're going to take before you step up to the tee and swing the club. And I thought, oh, come on. I realized, because I do it now, if you visualize, I'm going to hit this ball into the water hazard that's right in front of me, versus a nice high trajectory shot that lands safely on land. It happens more often to occur when you visualize the good shot rather than when you visualize the bad shot. So there's a lot to it. It's really, and this is what these level of athletes have been able to attain that it took me 73 years to figure out, that it really is real. If your body behaves the way your mind is telling it to. And if your mind sees a certain outcome, that outcome is more likely to happen than if your mind sees a poor outcome. So I think that's great life advice. I think glass half full people seem a lot more satisfied to me than glass half empty people. So I think we just need to all be a little bit more glass half full.
Dr. Beyer, thank you so much for educating me. I speak for all of our fans for educating us about overcoming the mental blocks and twisties and what athletes are going to on such a huge scale in front of the entire world. But Dr. Beyer, it's amazing to see Team USA, the women's gymnastics team, accomplished a road to redemption for gold.
Well, it's great to be here. It's great to share these thoughts. I'm trying to do as much as I can that's Olympics based this next couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, on Doctor Dugout this week, going to have Lashinda Demas, who's a 400-meter hurdler. She won a silver in the gold in the 2012 London Games. I asked her what it was like to see Queen Elizabeth parachute into Wembley Stadium, but that's an aside. But she actually won the silver. But then the gal who beat her and won gold 8, 9 years later, when they retested specimens, was found to be drug performance enhancing substances in her urine specimens. They took away her gold and gave it to this gal, Lashinda Demas, and she's actually going to be in Paris in a week for a medal ceremony, giving her her gold medal that she really won in 2012. So I think that's kind of a cool story. So 12 noon, AM 8:30. Want everybody listening, Doctor and Dugout this weekend. Lashinda Demas. We're going to be talking about her 12-year wait to get the gold medal that she really won in the 2012 games.
Oh, I can't wait for that, Dr. Beyer. You have me hooked. Thanks a lot for sharing that with us, Dr. Beyer. Thank you for joining us again on the Road to Recovery presented by the Hoag Orthopedic Institute.
Thanks for having me. We'll do it again soon.